Good afternoon. So I'm Jake with Purple Otter. We are Salesforce consultants based here in Canada. We work with nonprofits, pretty exclusively nonprofits actually, who are using Salesforce and want to step up their operations, as well as nonprofits wanting to begin using Salesforce. We do a lot of implementation work. And longtime friends of Engaging Networks. We've been working with the platform for 5-6 years, and kind of uniquely positioned as being both an Engaging Networks accredited technology partner, as well as an official Salesforce partner. So that's sort of where our expertise intersects here. You've seen this. This is our little guy. Kind of wish he was a pet of mine, but it's really just some stock video, but I've developed quite a bit of affection for him. Just kind of chilling out there, not a care in the world. Kind of a perfect role model for 2:30 p.m. on day 2 of the conference. Yeah. We're kind of adopting him as our mascot. Part of that story is, as Canadian consultants working with a lot of US clients, we've become known as the adorable Canadians, and it's just kind of this weird moniker that I have no idea where it comes from, but we're really leaning into with our brand. So we're going to talk today about CRM integrations, and my goal for this session is to kind of pull back the curtain on some of the possibilities of integrating a CRM with Engaging Networks. I'm going to have a bit of a Salesforce bias because that's the work we do and we know, but I'm going to try to keep it pretty general so that folks who are on other platforms, Blackbaud, Razor's Edge, etc., can also kind of benefit. So I just want to offer this question to kick us off. What is your biggest integration question or headache, whatever the case may be? If you want to submit a response to this in Slido, we'll have a bit of time towards the end of the session to maybe get into some real problems and kind of troubleshooting some real issues if you have something that you wish to share. So I'll just give you a minute to respond to that. All right. Feel free to keep talking or typing as I move on here. Just taking a step back, why even bother integrating? Some of the obvious responses to that are around scaling your operations. So if you're running a monthly sustainer program at 10,000 or 30,000 donors or 50,000 donors, as some of our clients are, it sort of brings a need to keep things really smooth and streamlined. So if you have to be manually updating records from time to time that don't sync properly, you have a lot of kind of little fixes or interventions you need to make. When you get up to this kind of sustainer level, 10,000 and above, it's going to quickly kill your program, essentially, to not have data flowing where it needs to go in the way it needs to go. You're going to spend more time on data cleanup than you are on stewardship and retention. So having really smooth integration is really important, obviously, as you're scaling up your donor program. We'll talk a little bit about building some targeted audiences, having data available from your CRM in Engaging Networks in order to query on it and build your audiences based on what you know about your donor from a 360-degree perspective. So not just their online activity, but also what they've done off-platform. And of course, personalizations. We don't want donors to have kind of split online, offline personalities. You don't want your digital program treating a donor in a different way than your direct mail program is. And so you need your CRM and your digital platform talking to each other. And this personalization can really be around not only naming preferences, how you address someone, but preferences around, for example, what kind of donor are they? Are you talking about a donor who is kind of a direct donor? are you talking to a sort of loosely affiliated donor who is given through a peer-to-peer program or in memory of someone? It might not be actually a directly engaged supporter yet. Those are some of the areas of personalization, we typically want to address in an integration. So general versus loosely affiliated. Are they donors who are general supporters? Do they like to give just to emergency appeals? There might be a geographical component. If you're running localized campaigns, one of our environmental clients runs localized campaigns on West Coast versus Ontario. And so being able to target emails based on where someone's located. The classic example of targeting cat people versus dog people if you're into animal welfare. These are all areas of personalization that if you're able to track in your CRM and sync into your digital platform, you can kind of really leverage. When we talk about being channel agnostic here, yesterday Chris reminded us of Deloitte's kind of 7 pivots towards digital maturity. And what we're talking about in integration is really about data mastery, about flexible infrastructure, about investing in flexible infrastructure, about having a unified customer experience. These are all sort of the foundations of what you need to build a healthy kind of fundraising program and healthy digital program. So, personalization. So these are just a couple of ties into EN functionality. Sam yesterday was talking us through the new conditional content functionality that is built off of profiles in engaging networks. There's, of course, marketing automations that can tie into, various data triggers. So our clients who have good CRM integrations running are able to use these tools based on CRM data. So are they a major donor? How have you coded that in your CRM? Is it based on an amount? Is it based on a portfolio assignment? That generally happens in the CRM, sync it over to EN, and then you can build conditional content for your major donors in EN. This is a particular automation that when someone signs up as a sustainer, whether they did that digitally or whether they did it through a face-to-face program or telemarketing or direct mail, if we sync that from the CRM into engaging networks can pick that up, send them a sustainer welcome series. So regardless of the channel they came in on, we can kick off an automation and speak to the donor. So before I get into some specific ways that this can be done, just taking a step back and asking, what does healthy integration look like? And this is the question that we end up engaging a lot because it's one thing for a platform to kind of have a connector you can turn on that kind of works. And it's a different thing to have an integration that is healthy and sustainable for the long term. And so these are just some criteria I thought up in preparing for this. There's probably a few things missing here. But healthy integration, so we talk about supporting and enhancing data integrity. So there's some questions around, for example, does the integration resolve or magnify the problem of deduplication in your CRM? That's a big question to bring to kind of every integration that you set up for your CRM. Does data go into the places where it needs to be? Or is the integration tied to like separate fields and different places in your platform so that digital and non-digital reporting are actually two different structures, right? Ideally, healthy integration will feed data into where it needs to go in your CRM so you have cohesive reporting throughout. Of course, there's security questions, compliancy questions around privacy and kind of credit card security standards. I've worked with clients where the integration, not with EN, but with other kind of external platforms, those external platforms did not know how to deal with credit card information. So it would just plunk credit card numbers into a CSV file that would then be transferred and processed on the nonprofit side. Don't do that. That's not a good integration pathway. So there's compliancy questions around evaluating whether a particular integration is going to be healthy for your organization or not. There's a question of scalability when we're talking about a new integration or introducing a new integration into your environment. So a number of clients we've worked with have had donation platforms, again, not engaging networks, that on busy days would just stop transferring donations after 500 donations on that day. And things would just kind of disappear. So there's scalability questions in planning an integration. Is it reliable? And does the integration alert you when something's broken? Systems stop talking to each other, no matter how hard we try to not have that happen. And you don't want to find out when you're doing your year-end reconciliation that you lost 3 months worth of donations. So, that question of how do you know proactively if something is broken is something we would want to ask when looking at a new integration. Is it an integration that is internally understood and documented? Can your staff, not at a minute technical level, but at a broad level, understand what data is coming in and what that means for your various processes? And can it adapt? So these are some of the criteria that we want to look at when we're talking about putting in a new kind of integration into a CRM ecosystem to make sure that's healthy and sustainable in the long term. So not unique to engaging networks, this kind of just general CRM practice. So let's talk about different ways of integrating with engaging networks in particular. I'm going to outline kind of 3 approaches here, or 3 different patterns, not necessarily exclusive, but just different tools that are available to accomplish this. First and foremost, there's the approach of using kind of pre-built point-to-point connectors. So having a connector that sits between engaging networks and your CRM and helps them to talk. There's a few examples here. I think there are a few more I've left off. Of course, engaging networks has a Salesforce connector that we help kind of set up quite frequently. Omatic has a suite of tools that work with both Salesforce and Razor's Edge to connect engaging networks to those platforms. JMG, Jeff is around here somewhere, a connector into Razor's Edge. So these are all pre-built connectors you kind of install out of box, do some configuration, and you're up and running, provided they work the way you want them to. And you can get pretty far with this kind of approach using a pre-built connector. Here's a sample of actually a number of clients we work with. This is kind of outlining, so the idea of what are all the different channels that a donor can come in on, and how can you use connectors to bring all those channels together and then build marketing profiles in engaging networks. So this particular example is using engaging networks for fundraising and peer-to-peer and advocacy, and added symbolic giving recently. So all of that digital activity happens on engaging networks, syncs into Salesforce as their CRM. But they also have a number of other sources going on. So they have a street canvassing program that is, obviously not digital. So there's a flow that brings all of that information into the CRM. There's a telemarketing program, a direct mail program that runs through a caging vendor that sends data into the CRM. They have an employee giving program managed mostly through Benevity that's flowing into the CRM, a few alternate digital platforms. So all of that information is coming into the CRM and kind of building out the consolidated profile of a supporter. So across all of the channels that we engage, what does a supporter look like? And it's possible from there to kind of build out a profile of who that supporter is. Are they a general donor? Are they a monthly sustainer? Do they give to emergency responses? Are they a loosely affiliated donor? So not direct donor, but through peer-to-peer or other people they know. Are they a major donor? et cetera. What does their total giving look like over the past few years? How's that trending? Salesforce can, or your CRM, not just Salesforce, can kind of collect all that information across all of the channels. And then the connector can push out that data back into engaging networks so that you can use that data to build audiences, drive marketing automation, build conditional content, and so on. So a lot of sophistication can be achieved just through kind of these point-to-point out-of-box connectors, which are by far the simplest scenario, supported by Omatic, supported by engaging networks. So this is sort of your lowest cost to entry kind of option, if this works for you. In terms of most of these pre-built connectors, you get to kind of select what data you're mapping in this link from your CRM back into engaging networks for driving your digital marketing. So just some examples of what our clients have found helpful. What's their highest gift across channels, not just digital? What's their last gift, date and amount across all channels, not just digital? Are they an active sustainer, a lapsed sustainer, a former sustainer? Like, these are all different groups that you could target in different ways with different messages. Are they a board member, a staff member, ambassador, media contact? Are they a major donor? Have they indicated preferences, like don't send me any fundraising appeals? These are all pretty obvious. You can get into opt-ins from offline sources. So if someone checks on their direct mail reply device, yes, I want to receive updates from whoever I'm donating to. Can that be entered in with the gift directly into the CRM, sync back to engaging networks? Usually the answer is yes. Rather than having to kind of enter them in the CRM and then go over to engaging networks and enter them there, and forgetting to enter them there, and you miss out on people. Last three pieces of direct mail sent. We have a handful of clients who have found this really helpful. Send out a mail and then support kind of an email chaser or an email kind of prep, I don't know what to call it, before the direct mail arrives, but kind of tying in the digital outreach with a direct mail piece. If your CRM can say, here are the mail pieces the donor has recently received, that can sync into engaging networks and you can build an audience out of it. Last three, funds supported. If you're heavily focused on fund-based, or you have special like emergency responses, that sort of thing, you can use that for email targeting. Engagement level, if you have the sense of like an engagement ladder or a kind of supporter cycle, whether they're a first-time giver or they've given multiple one-time gifts, or they're a monthly giver, or they're a lapsed donor. These are sometimes useful to sync because you can, of course, talk to these different groups in different ways. You might want to take all of your first-time givers and try to give them a second gift. You might want to take your folks who have shown multiple responses and see if you can convert them into a monthly donor. So these are all things that your CRM knows and can build from a holistic view of the donor. And by syncing them into EN, you're able to work with those. So you can get pretty far just with kind of these easy pre-built point-to-point connectors. Generally, how they look is you get to kind of select what field in your CRM you want to map into what field in engaging networks. So this is the Salesforce integration. Again, I said I would be Salesforce biased, but Omatic and others work in a similar way. So you're just kind of mapping one system to the next, and then the data flows, easy peasy. Let's go on to the next pattern here. So there's sort of that point-to-point model of connectors, and that takes you pretty far. But sometimes it doesn't take you far enough. There's sometimes limitations that you want to work around, or you want to kind of enhance or supplement what those connectors do. So the second pattern for integration here is API integrations. And I know we're getting far into the weeds for last session, second to last session, on a after lunch session. I'll try to keep it light though. API is essentially application programming interface. It's basically an agreement of how systems can talk to each other. It's essentially a tool set that lets a programmer say, I want to go and get some data from engaging networks and then populate it back into my CRM in a certain way. So some of the kinds of things an API might do, you might have a programmer call an API and say, give me a list of all the transactions that happened yesterday so that I can churn through those in my own way and populate them out in the CRM. Or your programmer might want to say, we brought in a recurring gift, go and start that on engaging networks. There's a API to like acquire a sustaining donor and then send them over to engaging networks and have them begin processing there. So APIs are really for when you have a problem, an integration problem that needs to be solved that no connector kind of out of box can do. Really powerful tool set. This is an example from one of our clients. They had a pain point around deduplication of contacts. And they were really heavy into peer-to-peer fundraising and found they ended up in this situation where a fundraiser would raise a bunch of money from grandma and grandpa and Aunt Susie and whomever, and then go into engaging networks and enter that, but tie all of those donations, all 3 different names, to the same email address. And that was causing lots of problems for this organization, and they didn't like how kind of the connectors they had access to handled that. So we worked out a flow here that was implemented basically around this API pattern. So this is basic. I know you can't read it too well, but basically saying we've got a new donor coming in. Let's search on the email address. And if we have someone in our database already who shares the same email address and same name, well, that's a match. So let's put the donation on that record. But if we have an email address that we know, but it's not a match on name, what are we going to do with that person? Well, if it's a peer-to-peer donation, this might be grandma and grandpa and Aunt Susie. So even though it's the same email address, we're going to create new records, new contact records for those 3 donors, as if they're 3 separate donors. But if it's not a peer-to-peer donation, let's create a new contact record, but add them to the same household as the other email address, but different name. So I'm just going through this as like an example of like some highly customized behavior that was sought, and a connector is not going to do this. But through an API integration working with a person who can code, these kinds of highly customized workflows become possible. And this essentially resolved a whole bunch of data hygiene issues for this particular client who had a very particular problem around their peer-to-peer fundraising. So that's an example of where this approach is helpful. Engaging Networks has a couple of different APIs. I won't get into the technical details here, but just know if you are an implementer, there's a couple to be aware of and some important differences to be aware of. Things you can do with the Engaging Networks API. You can export a list of transactions by date range. Give me everything that happened yesterday so that I can process that in whatever way I want to process it. I want to import a large volume of supporters, or I want to import a large volume of transactions so that they're available to query through email tools. Other things you can do is add or update an individual supporter in Engaging Networks. You can get the transactions belonging to an individual supporter. You can get the recurring transactions on platform. You can update a recurring transaction, their amount or their payment date or their status. So these are all things you can do if you have a programmer who knows how to tie into the API. You can achieve a remarkable degree of customization and automation by going through this approach. This is just kind of what it looks like. There's a chunk of code there. That's about a third of the code for a particular problem of syncing opt-ins from Salesforce to Engaging Networks in a highly kind of specific way for this client. Generally, if you're using Salesforce, you need someone who can write code in Apex, which is what this is. If you're on Razor's Edge, you generally have like a middle layer that calls Razor's Edge API, brings in data, calls out to engaging networks to push that data. So we're kind of past the realm here of point and click kind of setup. We're into the realm of working with a programmer to do this, but there's a whole lot of things that can be achieved if you go that direction. Another thing that's becoming really common around enterprise nonprofits, like bigger organizations with more complex needs, is this idea of iPaaS, or integration platform as a service, which is really a way of tying systems together in a way that's really customizable, really drives agility and the ability to adopt, and is really easy to support. Essentially, it's doing all of that code I just talked about and building it into a service. These are a few: MuleSoft, Jitterbit, Talend, of the more common ones. And what that looks like, this is an actual integration for one of our clients. I had to cut it off for screen size, but this is about 2/3 of the operation of syncing all contacts and all transactions from engaging networks to Salesforce in a custom way using a platform called MuleSoft. And all it's doing is threading together a bunch of steps. Go call the EN API, bring in that CSV data from EN, apply some custom matching logic to figure out what we do with the contacts that came in, and then go and write that into Salesforce. That's basically what this is doing in a really quick and easily to understand way. So that's it for kind of super custom options for integrating with your CRM if kind of point-to-point connectors are not sufficient. Lots of flexibility there. Third piece of CRM integration I want to talk about is payments. And this is, I talked a lot about contact data before. This is, really interesting area to look at what EN supports. This is an example from one of our clients who I just learned is actually here today. So I won't say who it is, but a little bit embarrassed to be picking on them a little bit here. The question of how we deal with sustainers is always a really interesting integration question. And what's so interesting about it is that sustainers are not just, a transaction happened and it's over, but you have to keep repeating transactions over and over. And how do you do that in a way that is secure with the credit card data that you have on file for that particular donor? So this is sort of the starting point for one of our clients, and I've seen 4 different iterations of this. It's not at all uncommon, which is why I'm using it as an example. This particular, larger nonprofit has a whole lot of channels trying to acquire new monthly sustainers. They have face-to-face canvassing, telemarketing. They also might acquire certain sustainers through their caging vendor through a reply device on a direct mail piece. So this is sort of where they have started, in that integrating all that information with their CRM essentially was completely and entirely separate from what happens on the digital side when someone goes to the website and signs up. So this top area was sort of some of the offline sustainer acquisition sources. The bottom area here is digital. And you can see kind of the starting point where those are kind of entirely separate realms. So we have digital going directly into engaging networks through the donation pages, and engaging networks takes care of all of the payment scheduling, all of the month-to-month processing. There's marketing automation and the supporter hub attached to that. So if someone starts to decline, we can send out emails saying, your credit card is failing. Can you go and update your information? Lots of powerful tools on the digital side. But on the more offline manual side, data was getting into the CRM through a couple of pathways. Their canvassing vendors would call the payment processor and then send through a CSV file of all the acquisitions with payment tokens in it. A couple of other vendors would just put the credit card number directly into a CSV file and send that over. Obviously, some big PCI compliance issues there. And then those files would be received and manually entered into the CRM. So what we end up with here is a state not only of a whole lot of manual stuff going on, but two kind of parallel ways of dealing with digital sustainers versus the non-digital ones. Every process around sustainers and around sustainer retention and sustainer reporting has to be kind of done twice, basically. Please don't do this, just to emphasize. So another pattern that Engaging Networks makes possible is, what if we unify all of that into the Engaging Networks platform and sort out all these processes we have going on into one place? And a couple of things that this does. One is obviously it streamlines having 2 to 3 different processes for everything you do with sustainers. You now have sustainers in one place, processing in one way, and you can build consistent processes around that. It also, for this particular client who selected Engaging Networks because they were excited about some of the marketing automation and the supporter hub pieces around the platform, they could never use that because 90% of their donors were processing outside of Engaging Networks. So this pattern allows allows you to take full advantage of all of those Engaging Networks features for sustainer retention, for both your online and offline acquisitions. And the way it works is simply back to the API I had talked about earlier. Get your vendors to submit the data into Engaging Networks instead of sending CSV files over. The REST API lets you essentially submit those donors into a page in Engaging Networks, and then Engaging Networks takes over everything from there. And then those supporters would, of course, sync out of Engaging Networks into the CRM the same way all of your digital donors do. So it kind of cleans up the whole process. All of the PCI compliance issues go away. There's a lot of manual processing that goes away, and just makes everything nice and consistent and able to really take advantage of those Engaging Networks tools. And in case that seems hard, again, one of these detailed slides, but this is what that API call looks like to submit a donor for more technical oriented folks into those pages. It's really simple, just passing through a list of fields with the donor's information, their credit card information, and the frequency and amount of their donation. So that's it. Have not covered all the possibilities, but kind of 3 of the patterns that we see most frequently. And I hope this is helpful just in kind of imagining some of the possibilities for particular pain points you might be facing.
Thank you so much, Jake. All right, so Jake had asked folks to say what their kind of biggest headache is when it comes to integration. So we have a few. Using email address as a match key. I feel like that's a dig at Engaging Networks, I have to say.
It is.
It's definitely a dig at Engaging Networks. That's all right. We'll take it in stride. The next here, dirty data and data mapping. Probably something you run into quite a bit, I would suspect.
Yeah, what do we mean by dirty data?
Did I turn that on for you?
Yeah, it's not on. Cool. Oh, it is on.
It is on, okay.
Hello?
There we go.
There we go,
Cool.
Okay. What do we mean by dirty data? Does someone want to?
Anyone want to confess that you were the person who said dirty data?
Yeah.
Ah, yes.
Dirty data, information that's not accurate that people submit.
So
Yeah.
it'd be information that is inaccurate that people submit on a form, for example.
Or old data.
Or old data.
Yeah, and always the risk that when they submit that, it might overwrite actual good data you have for that
Right.
person. If you had a good address on file and then they make a typo or something. Yeah, so it kind of depends what you're using. I know that Omatic as a connector has some cleanup tools to kind of help with this problem. On the Salesforce side, we have ways of essentially looking at incoming data and seeing if it's a change we want to accept or not. That's usually not built into a Salesforce connector. That's usually a behind-the-scenes implementation using something called Flow. I'm not sure on the Razor's Edge side what the options would be. I'm not a Razor's Edge expert, unfortunately, but yeah, something to pay attention to and requires some intentional effort to resolve.
5-minute warning.
Was that somebody?
I'll just need you out there to get everything connected.
What? Oh, hey, Sean, your mic's on wherever you are in this complex. Yeah, no problem. All right. So how about bi-directional integration and automation?
Yeah, so a number of connectors will support, not all of them, but a number of them will support kind of sending data back and forth, so pulling data into your CRM and then sending it back out to engaging networks. That's obviously critical if you want to like integrate your channels and not have kind of a split like digital, non-digital personality for everyone. That's a matter of finding the right connector, essentially.
And I think it comes back to the thing that this will now be the fourth time I think I've brought it up. Single source of the truth, multiple views of the truth, right? Salesforce, Razor's Edge, Roy Solutions, those can all be your single source of truth. What is coming back to engaging networks, right, is going to be a version of that truth for what you're trying to do as a part of your digital engagement structure.
For sure. And it could be that like, so engaging networks as the digital platform, there's a lot of information in there that you want to know about your digital program that is actually not necessarily relevant everywhere else. So there's always a decision to make about, your CRM might not need to know about every email sent or every email clicked on or whatever. Like those are things you want to know for your digital tracking, reporting. You might use it to seed other subsequent emails or drive automations. That all has to live in engaging networks and be there. But that kind of single source of truth holds kind of the common truth that everything needs to know. There might be specific truths to each platform that you just kind of keep in that place and let live in that place, so you keep things kind of clean.
I mean, I know what I saw, 7 years ago when I started doing work in engaging networks, everybody brought all of their historical donor information, like all of it, all the previous transactions from Luminate, for example, would come over into engaging networks because they wanted it all there. And instead, we now say, hey, that's all in Razor's Edge. That's all in Salesforce. What you need in engaging networks is you need the marketable and segmentable information from there. So I don't need all 20 donations from Joy. I need to know what her most recent contribution was, what her highest previous contribution was. Is she a lie bunt? Is she a side bunt? Where does she fall in my range of how I'm actually going to segment things out, right? And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about single source versus multiple views of the truth. How to handle opt-ins. So how to sync with a CRM without data overload. Should we integrate the data point at all?
What was that last bit?
Oh, should we integrate that data point at all? Should we integrate opt-ins over into our CRM?
I'm interested in your take on this
Sure.
as well. We see clients make all kinds of decisions around this question, depending on what their use case is. Usually we like to see like a sync actually from the CRM into engaging networks, because you're capturing kind of those offline donors who said, yes, I want to sign up to your list. And they tend to fall by the wayside if you're doing a two-step process of enter them into CRM, then enter them into EN. So we do like to see that data push automatically. Lots of people want it to sync back the other way, but when you start talking about the complexities of that and the risk of certain complexities there, often we stick with kind of recommending the one-way sync. But yeah, what do you think?
So where I would take it, I think if I was building an organization from like the ground up and I was thinking about, I want to come in and do a digital transformation, I want to know in my source of truth. And so I'm trying to pivot away from thinking of something as like a CRM. Like a CRM is a tool. A source of truth is a source of truth, right? Now your CRM and your source of truth may be the same thing, or they may not be the same thing, right? And that's one way, that's something you kind of need to dislodge in your head, that those could be two separate things, right? And they function in different ways. Because as you grow and expand, and you want to look at like data warehousing or data laking and all those kind of things, you may get to a point where your single source of truth is much different than Razor's Edge, right? And that's just one of the tools that you're using. What I would want to know, though, in my single source of truth is I would want to know if I can email someone, and if I can mail someone, and if I can call someone. But I don't need to know if they have opted in for advocacy, for fundraising, for e-commerce, I don't care about all of that. I want all of that in my digital engagement platform where I'm interacting with them in that way. But if for some reason they decided they no longer wanted to get emails from me, my source of truth needs to know that information, because that's going to be reflected by multiple people who are going to be looking in there. So that's how almost I would think about it. Yeah. And then, just for the ambassador at home right now, for Carrie, how do you tackle multiple email addresses in engaging networks for the same person and sync to Salesforce? There are technical answers, and then there are non-technical answers, I feel like, for this.
So, first of all, yesterday was announced a roadmap item for Salesforce specifically to resolve this issue.
Hey.
So there's that.
That's right, it was a Salesforce issue, not an engaging networks issue. Just point that out.
Well, so right now, for clients who are clients who really struggle with this, we tend to turn off the contact sync that comes out of box. Still use the transaction sync, but replace the contact sync with an API implementation, as we saw here, to kind of have finer to control over how we match contacts up.
Yeah. And I'll say, from my side, and the thing that I've preached for years is, I think a lot of people who come over into the digital side from the direct marketing, from major gifts, they have this idea that, if I were to send a piece of mail to someone's secondary address when they're not there, that would be like the most embarrassing thing ever. But if Ben at gmail.com and Ben at engagingnetworks.net and Ben at illinois.edu, if that's all the same person and they use all three of those addresses at different times to sign up for different forms and give donations, I want to be emailing him on all of those things. So then the idea is, in those edge cases, how do we want to design for about 97% of things work, and then that 3%, there's always going to be edge cases. You could drive yourself crazy trying to make sure it works 100% of the time. And I think it's just understanding that as long as my single source of truth is working, then if my engaging networks has multiple addresses, that's something that I can flex around if possible. Unless they're a board member, which they're almost always a board member, and then you just need to talk to that board member. And if the CRM has identical email addresses and multiple records, can you ensure the information currently in engaging networks isn't overwritten with different donor data? That is a much more technical question.
That'll depend on your connector.
Yeah, that'll depend on the connector. So reach out if that's you, Mr. Anonymous. So, well, Jake, thank you so much.